is a workshop basically to give you some wellness skills. So this is really going to solidify everything Dr. Bryson was presenting this morning about co-regulation, self-regulation, really having some hands-on tools about making sure that we are staying in our zone, as she's had this river of well-being. This model calls it the resiliency zone or the OK zone, so we will proceed with that. So I want to talk a little bit about the community resiliency model vision. So the vision is really to create resiliency, informed and trauma-informed individuals and communities. Megan, am I too loud for that side?
He's going to turn it down.
Okay, thank you. And it really is about having a commitment to bring wellness skills based on cutting-edge neuroscience, and that's one reason why we've invited Tina Bryson too, because she's so embedded in that science, to the rural community. And this model right here is basically internationally renowned. It has been incorporated into the social emotional learning curriculum from the Dalai Lama, and so it's been used in a lot of high intensive situations like natural disasters. We implemented it here in Mendocino County when our fires came in. We had a bunch of trained facilitators, and so we were able to go to the FEMA tents and actually do some co-regulation as a response to families losing their homes and what have you. So it was a really great model to be able to throw into action and have trained facilitators already in our community. Bonnie, jump in anytime, please. Okay, so it's a set of 6 wellness skills. Today we're going to go over the basic 3, and then we're going to use some help now skills, which have been used with, it's been embedded in educational systems, it's been embedded in therapy. There's also a it's like therapy. It's like one more, they have to be more, but this is the community model. So you don't have to be a therapist to use this, which I love, because there's a shortage of therapists, and there's always a friend, right? So it's really, really accessible. And it works across the lifespan. So what I love about this model is you can use it for children. I have 9 children from age 7 to 20, and so I'm able to use it across any of their ages. They are able to pick up the tools, to be able to do one, to help with their own regulation. It also helps with my own co-regulation, as Tina was saying, like our ability to kind of like pause, regulate ourselves, so then we can be that eye in the storm, which as Tina was referring to. It's also great across cultures because anybody can use this. Everybody has a nervous system. And so it's great across all cultures. And it can be arranged, it can be practiced anywhere. It can be practiced when you don't even think that you are needing to practice it, like I'm using right now, as far as like feels with my feet and how they're touching the ground and trying to ground myself. It can also be used across multiple abilities. So even if you have a person who is, intellectually or physically disabled or what have you, you can still implement these skills. What I would like for you to do right now is think about something, person, place, being that uplifts you. So what or who uplifts you? So just take a few minutes and just kind of pause on that. Make a mental image maybe in your mind's eye. Also about what or who gives you strength. Take an inventory of what or who helps you get through hard times when they happen. Does anybody feel comfortable enough to share anything that percolated for them? It's a small enough group. Yeah.
So first one is my grandson.
Your grandson?
He just turned 11, and he's just full of energy and positivity like nobody's business. And then the strength would be the boyfriend and help me getting through hard times. I have a friend who's lucky for me, she's a psychologist.
Yeah, it's great.
So anytime I need anything, and she always tells me, don't call me doctor. I do it for fun. So
In a loving way.
yeah.
In a joking way. That's
We
great.
give each other a hard time all the time. Those are my 3.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing.
Well, I'm like, oh, my grandkids, I have a pen. And the youngest is just 3. The oldest is 20, 21. Right? Anyway, and another thing that helped me a lot, because I am doing a lot of trouble right now, is gardening. Just being in touch with the land and getting dirty, and that makes just a lot of patience.
I love it. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else want to share what uplifts you, what gives you strength, Randy?
Honestly, my family, I believe in God, so God and my best friend. So all 3.
Yeah. It's really embedded in a lot of relationship building, right? Those connections. I can't help but notice that when you were talking about your grandchildren and gardening and your family, like smiles kind of creeped into your face, right? Your arms kind of opened. There was this opening in the gesturing that you were kind of expressing this is what uplifts you, right? So those are all signs of safety, right? When we feel open and we're kind of, our face is relaxed. And so again, going back to Tina's work in the neuroscience, like that safety is a foundational need for all of us. And when we are able to recall things that uplift us, to then restore that sense of safety in us, we are restoring our own well-being, right? So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? So before we get into the background of the model, we really need to find kind of a working definition of resilience, right? It's kind of been weaponized in a lot of ways, like, this can look in policy, like, oh, we don't need to fund that program because they're a resilient community, or what have you. Or, so really kind of percolate and understand, what does resilience mean to you, and what is the definition for community resilience? And before I go to the next slide, I'd like to just kind of hear again from the group. This is interactive. Let's all share this noisy machine here. What would you term as resilience? I know Tina gave us a very working definition. Anybody else want to add to that? Or
Just bouncing back from things that are difficult.
being able to bounce back when it's difficult? Yeah.
Overcoming obstacles.
Overcoming obstacles. Mm-hmm.
I think about it for a visual example, a tree. So a palm tree in high winds will bend and then come back up, whereas like an oak or something else.
We'll just break. Yeah. That ability to be flexible and come back to our constitution. Anybody else? What about community resilience? Is it individual? Yeah.
Communicating during times of instability.
Communication is so key, right? Absolutely. And you really did hit on all those points as far as, we can't define resiliency without acknowledging that there's also a collective and individual suffering, right? Resilience doesn't mean that there's a lack of suffering. Resilience doesn't mean that there's not a lack of, solution and whatever. Well, it is solution, but there's compassion and empathy. But we have to acknowledge that all of these pieces are true of resiliency. So we have this collective assets and strengths, just as much as we have this collective suffering, as well as like historical and institutional suffering that we've had, trauma. But it also identifies optimism and hope. It can be solution focused, and it embodies our overall well-being. One thing I love about this model is, and Tina mentioned this again too, like it's revolutionary about changing the way our lens is, right? Changing the way we've come and see situations. So this is just kind of a shift of that has been happening over the last 5 to 10 years is, the perspective of conventional as this assumption of that people are bad, right? Like, oh, well, they're bad, and we do this in our parenting, and we've seen parenting leaps and bounds in the way our parenting styles are. People need to be punished, right? I think Tina referred to that, like punishment versus consequence and what have you. And then, I don't know, can I get a show of hand of who's gone to some form of trauma-informed training over the last few years? We've all got this trauma-informed lens now, so we're able to identify, okay, well, people are just suffering. There's things that are happening to people that we need to identify and be able to respond to, right? And they need to learn how to, have some kind of buffering on that. Well, that's what the resilience informed is it's more of that action. So now that we are all aware that we are walking around with this trauma, what do we do with that? How do we respond to that? And so this model really has that action of it. And I am action driven. I like to get things done. I like to have a checklist. I like to see the little box get checked. And so having this model really gives me something that I can actually be able to do, right? I'm a doer. So it also is understanding that people are resilient. So yes, this happened to you, but what else is true? So this really came up when we were working with people who lost their homes in the fire. And it really came up and helping them fill out FEMA forms and what have you. And when they had flipped their lid and they're in this, they're reliving the escape or what have you. And in natural disasters in particular, this model can just say, when did you know you were safe? When did you know you were going to be okay? When did you know you were going to survive? Because it shifts out of that trauma response of I'm still living it to then now I'm present in this moment and I have a choice about what I can respond to. And having that choice in our nervous system and understanding what's happening on the inside, as Tina said, that bottom up, right? That responding to the sensations that are happening gives us much more control over what we can do and how we can make our next decision. So that's what I love about this model. So I know that Tina has her, what does she call hers? Oh, the river of well-being, which I kind of love too. This model uses it called the OK zone. And you'll see these repetitions of how neurobiologists these days are just taking the same information and packaging it and kind of communicating it in all of these different ways. So just like languages, we all need to try to meet different people where we're at, right? So this model uses the OK zone. But I do love the river of well-being, I'm not gonna lie. But it does identify this zone of well-being, right? And sometimes, you know, I have, like I said, multiple children, and they all came in with different widths of well-being, if you so to speak. Like some came in very sensitive, they need a little bit more response to. Some came in much more wide, right? It's not really about, you know, sometimes it's temperament, but it's not really about judging about their capability. It's about what their nervous system is, how is their nervous system structured and built. So the high zone, right, and that low zone. And Tina, I'm not going to bore you with all the things, it's very similar to what Tina just presented on, right? When we're in our high zone, we are out of our higher functioning brain, right? We are stressed, we're not thinking. This can look a variety of different ways. So some people, especially veterans, will get stuck in a high zone where their impression of being under threat is always present, right? Children who have suffered abuse and trauma, they're almost always in their high zone because they're always on alert because there's a perceived threat of some sort. And it doesn't mean that we don't get into our high zone or get into our low zone because we can bump in and out. Like a natural disaster can kind of come into our nervous system and shock us a little bit and kind of send us a reverberation through our nervous system. And I like to think of the OK zone being not just a flat line, but it's kind of like driving to the coast, right? There's a charge and a release of the brake and gas pedal, right? We're still on the same road, we're all traveling to the same destination, where we're charging and releasing, right? But we're staying on the road. We're not in our high zone, we're not in our low zone. So it's really about understanding what's happening on the inside and being able to identify those sensations, which we're going to get into some sensations in just a few minutes. And this just kind of like talks about like the two different zones, like as Tina was saying. The idea is to widen our zone. The more connections that we have with people, the more we respond in a way that our nervous system can actually feel safe, secure, and seen, right? Then we're going to be widening our resilience zone, or our OK zone, or our river of well-being, or whatever you want to call it. Your ability to withstand stresses. So one thing that I loved about Tina's presentation was it was so personal. The feelings and the frustrations she had with her parenting and the clients that she saw, like I feel like we could all at one point relate, right? It's because we all, one, have a nervous system, and two, we collectively all kind of experience trauma and stress in a very similar way. On the screen here are just some different ways that common reactions to stress and trauma, what we think when things occur, or what happens to our thinking, how we respond emotionally, what happens physically. And I think she talked about like the re-regulation, that breath, that psychosomatic breath. It's universal. We all take that from time to time when we get stressed. The spiritual, you mentioned faith, Brandy. It's such a huge, people lose faith, or sometimes they gain faith in times of trauma and stress. Behavior, isolating. Like, I love that Tina's presentation was like, all behavior is communication, right? And so it's communicating some kind of stressor. And then relationships, when we talk about what uplifts us, most times it's because we have a relationship with somebody else. We're in relation with somebody else. And that lack of relation can look like withdrawal and a bunch of other stuff. So it can decrease our well-being over time. But just like common reactions to trauma and stress, there are often common reactions to well-being, right? When we're connected to ourselves, when we're connected to our the well-being and our best self, we can have a lot of hope. We can have, the coming together for a joint purpose. I mean, everyone mentioned family, right? Sense of greater wisdom, compassion for others. What Tina said, we can't be empathetic when we're flipped our lid, right? What else should be on this list? What else do you think? This is not an exhaustive list by any means, but what else would uplift you, or what else is a sign of well-being for you?
Peace.
Peace. Mm-hmm.
Calm.
Calm. Yeah.
Motivation.
Motivation. Yep, the feeling to be able to motivate, having the energy to motivate. Yeah.
Practicing self-care.
Practicing self-care. Thank you. We're going to be doing that at the end of this. That's great. Thank you for doing that. Yes, practicing self-care. Absolutely. Anything else? So this all goes back to biology, right? I'm hoping that Tina's presentation brought that back to biology, right? So behavior is all some kind of dysregulation in our nervous system. It's not a mental weakness or what have you. So again, reflecting on that shift, that conventional shift of people are bad, they're doing it on purpose, to really understanding that they're just responding to an experience. They're just behaving in the only way their nervous system understands how to express it. And so these wellness skills will help you have that sense of re-regulation, right? And I think she said, history is not destiny, neither is adversity, right? So adversity is not destiny, and this model really embraces that. And it understands that, we can feel a sense of being trapped in our bodies, not being able. We've seen this in children, right? This whole, the temper tantrums or what have you. Stresses, like when we couldn't get the sound thing to work, like ebbs and flows. But there's really a season, right? And recognizing that our bodies and our nervous systems will all go through a season of growth. I think Tina, I don't know if she said it in her presentation or one of our in between break conversations, but the brain doesn't really finish developing until late 20s, early 30s, right? So that whole season of developing, this model really embraces and recognizes, and so understand where you're at, like, I'm not in my 20s anymore. That's really different, And so that shift that we are able to have and recognize is due to that neuroplasticity in our brains. So Tina mentioned it again, what wires together, fires together, you create those new connections. That reps, she called it, right? How many reps are you gonna do? So building and doing those reps builds stronger neural pathways of new ways of being and being able to connect with your own well-being and being able to connect and identify when you are dysregulated or having a system around you that says, I notice you're a little stressed right now. Can I get you a glass of water, right? I love that my staff can see when I'm just on the high end of my zone and they're like, here, have some water. Can I do something for you? Have you eaten today? We need those people in our life to remind us to do our own regulation, right? Okay, so let's get into the 6 skills because they're kind of fun. Where we're at with it. Oh, okay. So it all starts with, Tina had the hand model of the brain. What I like to think of with tracking is we're going to track our nervous system. And we're going to do that together. But tracking is the key skill of this model, so you can be able to pay attention to what's happening on the inside. So it's very similar to on a hot summer day in Ukiah, you go outside and the sun is on you and you are starting to overheat. What may be some of the things that you do? Drink some water, go in the shade,
Take off my sweater.
take off a sweater, take off a layer, get an umbrella, change, right? You're gonna make a change of some sort. You're gonna make that change because you're having a sensation of being overheated. And so then you have a choice to drink some water or move into the shade or whatever. You're kind of tracking and taking care of yourself, right? Well, that happens on the inside too. So with my kids, when they come home from school, I'm teaching them to track their system. And they can say, I'm feeling really grumpy right now and I need a snack, right? Because they're tracking how they're feeling on the inside. So I like to think of it as a hand. So tracking is the main palm. That's where you're going to carry the bulk of these wellness skills, if you will, right? And then all the other skills are kind of like pendulums to this core tracking, right? So we have the top 3, which we'll be using today, is resourcing, grounding, help now, and then there's gesturing and shift and stay. So I kind of already mentioned gesturing when you were talking about your grandkids over there, right? So this smile that comes across, and you have this opening of your arms. Well, when you're making these gestures, even if you're just making them, you can kind of get a sense of that well-being. So that's just one of the skills. See, now we're going to do the top 4 in help nows. Anyway, so we're going to do the top 3. So tracking. Breathing sensations. Okay, so you guys have been sitting. I'm going to invite you to stand if you want to. You don't have to, but I would invite you to stand. This is just a really simple tracking exercise. Just stretch. I love it. All these like organic movements happening. You can just take your 2 hands together, put them together, and just rub them as fast as you can. Rub them, rub them. Keep going. Generate change. Yeah. We're gonna stop. And just notice what's happening on your palms or your arms. What are some of the sensations that you're sensing?
Energy.
Energy? Warmth? Anything else? Vibrations? Yeah. It's probably shifted again since you stopped, right? Now what are you sensing in your hands? Tingling, maybe cooling down a little bit now. Yeah? You just did your first tracking exercise. You just tracked some sensations. That's how easy it is. Now we're done. Anyway, just kidding. So that's just an easy tracking. Noticing what's happening, right? So who said it was vibrating? Was that pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant, that vibration?
It was neutral.
It was neutral. Okay. Neutral. What about the warmth, Megan? You mentioned it was warm. Was it pleasant? It was pleasant. Sometimes it can be unpleasant if it's too warm, right? Anybody else want to share anything that the sensations that I got, they were pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant?
It was pretty relaxing.
It was pretty what?
Relaxing.
Relaxing. So was that pleasant or?
Pleasant.
Pleasant, okay. So when you notice sensations, and you can identify if they're a pleasant sensation, then you can choose to stay in that, right? If it's unpleasant and you recognize it, then we're going to learn some other skills to choose to shift and stay. We are going to go over all the skills yesterday. And stay at a sensation that's more pleasant. You may say that if you want to, you can say if you want to. So, let me get back, sorry. Anyway, basically what we pay attention to grows. And I think this is what Tina mentioned too, right? That repetition, right? Using it and what we pay attention to grows. Very much like when we have our garden. Who lets the weeds just keep going in their garden? Right? You have to pay attention to that stuff or they'll just continue to grow, right? That's just hair, sorry. But we also want to pay attention to the things like when Tina was saying, like, what does this behavior say to me, right? And how do I connect with this person? So paying attention to all of that will help those neural pathways to grow our awareness of what needs to happen and give us more choice. This is a study from Dr. Neiman Ma. I think that's Neiman Ma. This is kind of a surprising story. It was done cross-culturally. So I think there was like 8 different cultures that it was done in. And each culture was given a variety of images to look at. And based on those images, they were supposed to color, and it's not like computer generated, but they were supposed to color in using certain colors, like where they were feeling the most sensation, right? Just the idea to identify a sensation and where they were feeling. And then when they aggregated all the data, they noticed that we get stronger sensations in different parts of our body, and they're pretty universal. So what stands out for you when you look at this? When I first saw this, what stood out for me was anger. And you see all of this energy and sensation in the limbs and the arms. And so regulating, or having the ability to learn to regulate a child's anger or an adult's anger can potentially ultimately reduce violence, right? Because this is all activated. I love that shame is right in the eyes. What else comes? What else stands out to anybody?
Happiness is all over though.
Happiness is all over, right? Yeah. Happiness is all over, and I love that love is a huge heart, right? Our whole chest just fills up with just the sense of love. And it swells into our head, into our lower regions. Yeah, I just love this. And well-being can come through a variety of different ways, right? So thinking about it, just like when we were talking about our grandkids, or having faith, thinking about our faith when we think about things. It can come in with sensing, like we did with the hands, and feeling. Like when we think about something, we sense something, and it conjures up a feeling. So being aware that no door is the wrong door. So I think I've mentioned this before, but when we have an idea of what we're sensing, then we have a little bit more control in how we can respond to that, and that choice, and having a choice can be so empowering of kind of calming down that part of us that might want to feel like we're a victim or feel like, you know, I should get what I want or what have you. But it is a choice, and when it grows, when you pay attention to it, it does grow. So we did a little bit of resourcing earlier, but I want to call you back to when I asked you to think about what uplifts you, what gives you strength. If you can think about what uplifts you and what gives you strength, I'd like to invite you to kind of sit with that a little bit more. So Brandy, I think you mentioned faith, right? So when you think about your faith, if I may call you out on it, I know you, so I feel like you'll play with me. When you think about that faith, can you describe to me or give us a couple of ideas of what's happening on the inside when you think about that? What sensations come up for you?
So I think if you went back to like the previous slide, I feel the same way inside the picture, like through my chest, my mind, just kind of like all over my body.
And is that like an expansion? Is it a warmth, or just you just get more stimulation there? You're
I would
feeling it.
say it's a warmth.
And so having that, and that's a pleasant feeling, I imagine. So when you were having a stressful situation, if you with a family or maybe a work situation or something happens, is that something that you think that you would recall to kind of bring back a sense of well-being?
Always.
Yeah. So when you look at this picture, what do you think would be pleasant for people in this photo? No, wait. Lazy. Coffee? You say coffee. Because I need coffee right now. Laughter. Yeah.
Camaraderie.
Camaraderie. Yeah.
Connection.
Connection.
Enjoy.
Food.
Enjoy food.
Yeah. I don't know who thought pizza and coffee went together, but I'm here for it. Two of my favorites, okay? I'm all here for it. Yes. So identify a personal resource. Right. The important thing about resourcing is and if we had more time, we would break out into dyads or small groups and we would kind of explore like what our resources were and how they made us feel and when we could maybe use them. We're going to write that into our self-care plan at the very end, like what uplifts us. But one thing to know about resourcing, it can be real, it can be imagined, it can be a pet, it can be a place, you know? And when you do your thinking of a resource that uplifts you, it is really helpful if you can be a little bit specific, right? So for instance, one of my resources is the beach. I love going to the beach. But what do I love about going to the beach? I love sinking my toes in the slightly warm sand and feeling all the dry sand like between my toes and like feeling like the hard bits kind of crunch under my feet. And then hearing the waves kind of like just build and then come to a crash. Like when I think about those things, I feel my shoulders drop. I have a sense of calm in my well-being. It brings me to a sense of like, okay, what was the problem you want me to solve right now? I feel like I have now the resolves to actually address it. So we can pull on that resource, those doorways of thinking, feeling, sensing, we can pull on that resource at any moment that we want to. We're not dysregulated. But then we're going to show some help skills to keep us re-regulate, and then we can go right back into resourcing. Okay, so let's do a skill. This is another one about grounding. Have anybody done like meditation, grounding? I'm going to do just a little bit. I'm going to just walk you through a very simple grounding exercise right now. I do this with my kids at night. It helps them kind of just calm down, especially when they're really anxious. But I also do this. I've done it like 3 times a day because I get really nervous speaking in front of people. So I have to like disappear and like go ground myself, right? But it's a sense of feeling connected to something, right? Feeling supported, right? Having this foundational support helps us recenter when we're feeling, my staff will tell me, you're feeling a little afraid, and I'll actually afraid, I get a little afraid, right? With my blankets being untethered. So being grounded, it has this sense, and you can ground, we're gonna do one here, but one of my favorite things to do in the summertime is we go camping at this high elevation lake, it's over Little Reserve, and there's no motorized boats around it, so it's like, there's just canoes and kayaks and that kind of stuff, you know. And I'll ground when I'm floating. So you can ground in water, totally fine. Okay, so I invite you, now, open the pub now, thank you. I invite you now to just kind of feel where you are being supported in your chair. You can stand up and move around the room if you want to. If you want to lean against the wall, if you want to lay down on the floor, you can do that too. But feel where you're supported. Maybe how your feet are contacting the ground. Maybe where your back is on the chair. If you want to close your eyes, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to close your eyes for this exercise. But I encourage you to just sense in your body what area is being connected and supported with either the chair, the wall, or the floor. And then as you're noticing where you're feeling support, I invite you to identify if that's a pleasant sensation, or it's an unpleasant sensation, or just neutral. And if you identify any area that's unpleasant, I invite you to shift to an area that does feel pleasant. And just stay with that and feel where that support is making contact with your back, your legs, your feet. I invite you to just draw your attention back to the room now. So you can do that at any moment. Didn't take that long, less than 30 seconds. And it restores your well-being. When I was noticing the room, I noticed people taking a deep breath. A little sigh, right? All of those are releases, right? Like Tina said, like all those releases look a different way. Sighing, laughing, coughing, bottom burps. All of that is a release of that energy, just kind of like being able to be metabolized. So that's a simple grounding exercise. And then now we're going to do the help now skills, which I just love because they work if you're in your high zone or they work if you're in your low zone. So this will be the time where you can kind of get up. If you'll notice, we have stations around the room. I'll start with the sound station up. But what happens is when we have been dysregulated and when we are dysregulated, we do what Tina calls we flipped our lid, right? And we need a biological kind of interruption. So this interrupts that whole like flipping the lid thing. So making yourself take a drink of water. I don't have any water here, I forgot. I'm supposed to do that. Anyway, if you have water, take a drink of water. If you have water. Oh no, there's water over there. So there's a water station, great. So when you take a drink of water, the act of swallowing and paying attention to where the water kind of is in your mouth and then in your throat, doing that conscious kind of control thinking, shifts our biology, shifts our nervous system from being dysregulated into a sense of wait, we're swallowing something. Hold on. It generates a different part of our brain. I'm not a neurobiologist, so these little skills, these help now skills, and these are 10 of them, but they're really anything that disrupts the dysregulation, basically, and kind of helps to restore. And then once you kind of like calm down a little bit, I think, Tina said there's only a few synapses here to help us really connect all three systems of our brain. It will help you reconnect that so then you can return to problem solving. These skills will not solve your problem, but they will help you solve the problem, help you calm down and very regulate to solve the problem. So there's different stations. There's a water station back there. There's thank you. There's count backwards. There's notice the colors of the room. We have some resources there you can kind of ponder on. Over here, you can pick a piece of the wall and either lean against into it or press into it. When I was working in the FEMA tents up in Butte for the Paradise fires, I went there and helped during the emergency response. And this woman, again, was like so dysregulated and was just in her trauma story, right? And I just invited her. I said, can we come over here and can we just push on this wall for a few minutes? She's like, you want me to do what? So just I invite you. You don't have to. You can just push on the wall. She almost pushed down the partition. But then she came away from it, she's like, oh my gosh, okay, what did you want me to do? And she started laughing a little bit. She goes, I haven't laughed since the fire. And so then we sat down and could fill out the paperwork. But she was so dysregulated, she couldn't even sit down and be with the paperwork. So that's what these skills are for, just to kind of disrupt that little trauma response cycle that you're in, so then you can get back to problem solving. So pushing, you can either use your arms, you can use your back, or what have you. So I encourage you to stand up, spend a few minutes. You can go to each station, go around, walk around. I'm going to set up the sound one so you can notice some sounds. And then we'll come back here and we'll do a little self-care plan before we close up the rest of the conference. Together, one of the things we really wanted to do for this conference was to really load up your toolbox with some tools, right? We really wanted this to be actionable. We understand the stresses that each of you go through in your work. All of you work on some variety of high-risk populations and high-risk, situations as far as your programs go. And so we really wanted to be able to give you some skills. And so one thing I love about the CRM skills too is this is going to help your own resolve and your own resilience for your own work, right? Giving you a little bit of time to kind of recover from whatever stress is percolating in your work situation. So metabolizing that stress is really, really needed for all of our high-risk jobs and positions that we're doing. There is an app, it's called the iChill app. It's free. You can download it on your phone. You access it on the website even, just ichillapp.com. Yeah, I think so, right there, ichillapp.com. And it has all of the Help Now skills on it. It has a grounding exercise that Elaine Miller-Carras, who's the founder of this model, actually walks you through. It's also available in English and Spanish and a couple of different languages now, but I know it's available finally in English and Spanish primarily. So I encourage you to use it, put it as another tool in your tool chest to use when you need to. Share it with clients or share it with your family members. And then the last bit is just a self-care plan. You mentioned it, right? Having a good self-care plan is just crucial for our own well-being, our own, resilience moving forward. So going back to, if you want to, I think everyone has a little piece of paper or what have you, or a booklet, but just write down some statements about what uplifts you, what gets you through, and identify what you're doing to widen your own resiliency zone, to make sure you're doing your due diligence, practicing that what pays the attention to grows, and those reps that Tina mentioned, right? What are you doing to widen your resiliency zone? I keep hearing the whining, sorry. And if you found any of these skills, maybe take an inventory of which ones you think you'll go to if you need, something in your toolbox to kind of respond to quickly. When I'm working with a lot of parents, we do role playing. Even when I'm working with my children, when my child was getting bullied at school, we did role playing at home to kind of walk through, like have him practice what he's going to say to his bully or to his friend or what have you when he was younger. So role playing is really important as far as like having an idea of what you're going to do if the situation comes up. So it's really good to understand what skills might work for you. So as you walked around and noticed a lot of you guys pushing against the wall or listening to the sounds or what have you, identify which one that you might be your go-to if you come up into or are addressed with some kind of stress or trauma. And then what do you need to, identify what do you need to do differently? So I love that I have a supportive staff who reminds me to eat lunch. That's really nice. So what do you need to do differently to maybe do some investments in widening your zone? Just being reflective of that. And then write an encouraging statement to yourself. Talk to yourself like you would your best friend. What would you say to your best friend if they were going through something that you're going through? We're so self-critical. And so I think taking the time to be encouraging to our own self helps, again, widen that resiliency zone and makes investments in our overall well-being over time. I don't want to see that sign again. Just kidding. Thank you. And then I encourage you to share your self-plan with somebody else. So accountability is everything, right? Who's in your relational support system? So sharing that plan is really important. So this is I love this slide just because it shows how international that we all are able to use this model, and this model truly is international. Elaine and her team go all over and have responded to a variety of different natural disasters and using this model to help restore resiliency and rebuild communities who have been going through things. So just believes in common humanity and in a world where people of all religions, races, abilities, ages, sexual orientation, and gender identification are equally respected, included, and welcomed. So when we bring awareness to the inner wisdom of our bodies, well-being can grow even in times of great suffering, and moments of gratitude can be seen and sensed. So that's just the going message. I think that's it. Yep. So there should be evaluations on your table, but I hope that it was helpful and you are able to walk away with something. Thank you for your time. Any questions or any last comments? Any of the wellness skills or anything? Yeah, Brandy?
I just have a comment. Self-care is an afterthought,
Always an afterthought, isn't it?
but like make it not aftercare, because aftercare
Yeah.
doesn't help you keep that resilience and keep
Yeah.
pouring to help others.
Yeah, thank you, Brandy. It is so. It's that emergency, it's that mask that we use on the airplane, right? They always tell us put our own mask on so then we can care for those around us. So please, I loved, another visual that I loved when for my kids' school was if you imagine a cauldron in front of you, right? And you have a ladle that you're doling out support, warmth, empathy, compassion, or what have you. You don't dole from your cauldron, you dole from the overflow. That's where you give from. So you have to keep filling your cauldron, and whatever's extra and flowing over, that's what you're able to give back. So that's why you don't keep your bucket dry. You can't dry the bucket, because you guys are all valuable resources in our community. We need all of you. So thank you.